taller I become. The farther you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can deny me, you can decide to turn your face away. No matter, 'cause there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it. Though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that I pride.
We bathed and we drank the water for 30 years or over 30 years. In 1981, the EPA came in and designated Tucson Superfund. We didn't know anything about what had happened to us for 5 years until a newspaper reporter did an investigative report, and we saw the article that came out in the paper. It was a series of articles. We were never informed what happens to people who become contaminated by drinking contaminated water. We knew that there was a large population in our area that were suffering. We were suffering a lot of cancers, and we thought, you know, my God, what's happening here? My neighbors, my friends, my family have suffered greatly. I have lupus. My husband has bladder cancer. My son has a rare form of muscular dystrophy. My first grandchild was born dead. My aunt died of cancer. That's 4 generations that we've seen in our family.
We wanted to begin this press conference with Rosemarie Augustine's story because that is the reason why this summit has been called. Her story can be repeated in thousands of communities throughout this nation. We've come to Washington, D.C. to catch the attention of the president and the government and all forces that be that have contributed to our sisters and her communities suffering and pain. Native American, African American, Hispanic American, and Asian American delegates to the First National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit will be arriving here today from every state in the nation, along with delegates from Canada, Puerto Rico, the Marshall Islands, Central America, and from Africa. The convening of this leadership summit has the potential to reshape and redefine the environmental movement. The United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice is pleased to sponsor this historic leadership summit. Environmental racism is racial discrimination in environmental policy making, the enforcement of regulation and laws, the deliberate targeting of people of color communities for toxic waste facilities, the official sanctioning of the life-threatening presence of poisons and pollutants in our communities, and the history of excluding people of color from the leadership of the environmental movement.
O Creator, Great Spirit, and to the holy ones of all 4 directions, I call upon you this day in the sacred manner that you truly will hear our prayer and our plea for the existence of us foolish children and those of us who are still in ignorance and in no light, that you will bring us all together, Creator, to bring about a change that will be in harmony with all life, with all upon Mother Earth, and also to be in acknowledgement that the life you have given us is beautiful and it is very powerful. But only when we become true people in the manner that we acknowledge you, Creator, and we acknowledge our traditional spiritual ways and ceremonies. I beg of you, Creator, to put us back on that path. Put us back, Creator. Let us help one another. Let us bring our minds as one, so that our children and those not yet born will have a place, will be able to drink the water, will be able to walk upon this earth away from radiation, away and free from contaminants of our food and our plant life. Oh, Creator, I call upon the holy beings to be with us.
And I think it's very appropriate not only that we started with a prayer here, but that we did it with the original environmentalists in this country, the Native Americans. And that it also helped underscore the spirituality with which we all feel a relationship with the land, the air, and the water that we live upon, drink, eat from, so that maybe we can help bring the message home to others.
I hope we all go by Tony and Singman and Ben and so on while we are here. So we don't have any more of those Dr. Reeds and Reverend Reeds and those things. So we can really get to know each other at the first name basis. You see, as of October 15th, the numbers of the people who were invited and the people who have registered. But again, this is 10 days ago. We have over 300 the people who have actually registered and who will be the delegates here as we struggle together with this issue. It is interesting also to note that in a group like this, representation by gender, we are about equal. I think normally in the meetings of different kinds, you see much more of a male rather than female. I think we are proud of the fact that we are about equal numbers of people here present. Let us greet each other with our applause to each other once again.
We have come from Native American sovereign nations and communities, from African American, from Hispanic American, from Asian American communities. Some of us have suffered some defeats. Some of us have won some victories. Yet all of us are here tonight because of our commitment, because of our leadership responsibilities. This is a leadership summit. Many of you were identified by your colleagues and by sisters and brothers who knew you would come to this place at this time to represent the hundreds of thousands of our communities out there that are engaged in struggle. And that is why we took the extraordinary effort to make sure that the right people would get the right invitations. And it is important that as delegates who will be later joined by participants and observers, I pray that when Friday evening comes, when we are joined in large measure by the other folk, that we don't lose this moment, that we don't try to be ashamed that we've spent some time in our own self-togetherness so that we can be ready to have the kind of critical, constructive dialogue that is going to be necessary. Come Sunday morning, there's going to be a new environmental movement in the United States of America. And so we're not organizing an anti-white movement. We are organizing an anti-injustice movement. We're organizing an anti-racism movement. We're organizing an anti-environmental injustice movement. That is the character of our movement. And that is the character of our victory from this day and for all days to come. God bless you.
The Congressional Black Caucus is the entity here on Capitol Hill that by far has the absolute best voting record on the environment. And we're very pleased to have with us here tonight, and honored to have with us here tonight, the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus from Brooklyn, New York, Congressman Ed Towns.
I bring you greetings from those 22 black men and 4 black women that call themselves the Congressional Black Caucus right here on Capitol Hill. And let me say, Brother Chavez, this is a beautiful sight. You know, aside from chairing the Congressional Black Caucus, I also serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee. And I also chair the Brain Trust on energy and the environment.
Again, let me go back to the back here.
Yes, my name is Sarah James, and I'm from Arctic Village, Alaska. And my nation, Gwich'in Nation, is the last one to contact on what you call Columbus discovery. And the destruction is continuing up there. The oil spill is not over yet. The small birds like sandpipers that hangs around the shore, we haven't seen them back since the oil spill. I have a material here that would direct you to what each of you would take an action on. So I'll have these material at my table or out in the front later. And Masicho Shalaknai, thank you, my relation.
My name is Chris Mathis. I'm an organizer with the Labor Community Strategy Center in Los Angeles. I'm here with several other people. I'm very grateful to be here. I stand here, as many of you are, the system's worst nightmare. A black man who's conscious, who knows from where he comes, who knows where the struggle has to go, and is not going to stop fighting until we get what we want. So now that we have the worst air pollution in Los Angeles, some 1,600 people right now die from particulate deaths as particulate matter is lodged in people's lungs. We have a high rate of emphysema, asthma, cancer in Los Angeles, and higher, of course, in communities of color.
Thank you. It's great to be here. My name is Ruben Solis from San Antonio, Texas, and I'm a co-chair with the Southwest Network for Environmental and Economic Justice. And I also work with a group of 1,150 Mexican-American women that were laid off by a plant closing of Levi Strauss & Company in San Antonio. And when we hear about our cause today and the beautiful numbers of people here today, we have to recall that one of the reasons why we have the kind of environmental racism that we have and that we're going to struggle together against is because of the economic blackmail that they have us under. And one of those is plant closings. I would ask that we support the Fuerza Unida Levi boycott. Take the labels off of every Levi product that you have. Send them a message that you will no longer buy the products until they have brought justice to the issue of the women in San Antonio, the women of Fuerza Unida, which is United Force. So they sent greetings from San Antonio and express solidarity with all of our struggles. Thank you.
Brothers and sisters, it's been my great fortune to be involved in great movements in this country in the movement for racial justice, in the movement for ethnic justice, in the movement for justice for women, in the movement for economic justice, as a civil liberties union in the movement for criminal justice, and now we see here the final leg of the movement for environmental justice. This conference says, clearer and louder than anything I could imagine, that all these issues are our issues and that especially environmental justice is our issue. That is what this conference is going to say to the Congress which sits here where you sit today, that our bills have come due. Our bills are overdue. Our bills have been the last to be submitted, and we submit them now for immediate payment. The environment belongs to all of God's children. You assert that this evening. America will one day hear you. This I promise you. This one member of Congress means to make sure that the Congress of the United States hears your call. We know we have inherited this earth in this generation, and we mean to take our inheritance now. Thank you for coming to Washington.
And that's what we're all about in Washington, D.C., powerizing ourselves to go back in our communities, because what this is all about is building a movement. No? Building a movement. And a movement, as a movement gets built, starts from the bottom up. And those movements that we've seen develop from the top down are no longer there. So what we're about here is building a network, or building a net that works. I wanted to finish actually by just offering to you for discussion the principles of environmental justice. It says, we the people of color of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, to reestablish our spiritual interdependence to the sacredness of the environment, to ensure environmental justice, to promote economic alternatives which will contribute to the development of environmentally safe jobs, and to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity that have been denied by over 500 years of colonization and oppression, which results in the poisoning of our communities and land, do affirm and adopt these principles of environmental justice. 1, environmental justice demands that public policy be based on mutual respect and justice for all peoples. Okay, environmental justice calls for the universal protection from the production and disposal of poisons that threaten the fundamental right to clean air, land, water, and food. Okay? Environmental justice affirms ecological, we've been practicing that one for a while though, ecological unity and the interdependence of all species and the right to be free from ecological destruction. Number 10, environmental justice mandates that the Earth's resources be used responsibly, equitably, and in the interest of a sustainable planet. This is the initial draft of the principles of environmental justice. When we leave here this week, we will leave the summit with a final set of principles that we will carry back home and institute in all of our communities throughout this country. This is our responsibility. The future of our communities is at stake. Venceremos, we will win. Thank you very much.
In any case, we have a permit to have an action on the grassy grounds on the south side of the Capitol. In terms of the action we're going to do tomorrow, we're going to have to walk fast over to the Capitol in order for us to exercise the kind of discipline that Reverend Chavis talked about?
Let me say that it has been a long day, but a very meaningful day, an effective day. We have, in our own fashion, spoken to this. Even though some of you have to come together at 7:30, that's very important. So let us continue tomorrow, another wonderful day. So hope you have a good rest, and see you tomorrow morning early. Thank you.
Open our hearts and minds to your spirit as we struggle to deepen our understanding of the environment, the injustice, and the struggle for environmental justice. As we travel the road toward environmental justice, we will face many moments of struggle. Remind us that in the midst of these struggles, thou will be with us. We ask all this in the name of the one God, revealed to us in many, many ways. Amen.
Hibawuanat, as we say in Cheyenne country. I'm Gail Small. I'm one of your co-chair people. I'm from Northern Cheyenne country in Montana, and it's a real pleasure for me to be here. Our gathering this morning is to build upon yesterday's strong beginning. Today we hope to begin building a multiracial and multicultural environmental justice movement by discerning, recovering, and seeking ways to act upon our historical and cultural roots with respect to our environment.
I'm sure you understand, but I just want to reiterate it, that there is no universal Indian culture nor universal Indian language, that there are rather many different tribal people, each with a distinct language, a distinct history, and a distinct culture, and distinct governments, and governments that existed long before there was a United States government. And so that though there are differences among and between tribal people, however, there are a significant number of commonalities also. And one of those commonalities, I think, is the way we view the environment and the way we view land. One of the early extreme ideological differences that Native people in general had with the early settlers is the way we view the environment and the way we view land. And so that there was an immediate sort of conflict when settlers came here and looked at our life and the way we lived our life and saw the environment as something for exploitation and development rather than something that we should be a part of, and we're just a part of, and we should sustain. Why is it that 80% of all people, not just people of color, but conservative people, white people, Indian people, all kinds of people think that the environment is one of the single most important issues that we need to deal with? And why is it that no national leaders have taken this on as an issue? I don't know what's going on. I don't understand that. So I think that so I've come to the conclusion lately in both the environment and the other issues that face us in our communities that the way that we need to do things is sort of the way you're doing things, and that is to look into our own history and our own culture and our own communities for solutions to our problems.
We have to understand the link, the correlation between exploitation of land and exploitation of people. The two are the same. You cannot separate the two. This country was built on three basic principles, three basic tenets: free land, free labor, and free men. The land was stolen from the indigenous people, and we all know that the historical record is clear. Free labor, we know who provided the free labor. It was not cheap labor, it was free labor. Africans brought to this country in chains on the bottoms of ships, packed like sardines, worked the land, built this country from the bottom up, blood, sweat, and tears. Free labor. Free men, we know who the free men were. only white men with property could vote. Now, you build a country on that foundation, and that's where we are today. We are still struggling with this whole notion of free land. Use wilderness areas, natural areas, we see it as undeveloped, ripe for condominium development. We go to King and Queen County, Virginia, recent decision by a federal judge. It says okay to put 4 out of 4 of that county-run landfills in black communities in that county. It's not unconstitutional because the County Board of Supervisors balance the economic, the environmental, and the cultural aspects of that. Now, what does that mean? It means, in essence, that black communities are compatible land use for garbage. We say no to that. We say no to genocide. We say no to this madness.
We are Chicanos. As Chicanos, we are Mexicanos, we are Españoles. We are Gachupines, we are Indígenas. We are Genízaros, we are Latinos. We are Surumatos, we are Manitos. We are Negros and Blancos. We are Morenos and Güeros. We are Nacay and we are Castilla. That's what Chicanos are in the southwestern part of the United States. But I think in terms of our humanness, and that's what we are basically above all of these other things, is humans, that the role that we play in today's world, one of the most important roles that we have taken up as Tonantzin, in Tonantzin, and as Chicanos, is to act and to serve and to offer ourselves as the bridge between North and South America, as the bridge for all the colors, all the people in North and South America. We're at 500 years of East and West thinking. Chicanos, along with everyone here in the room, can play a major role and should play a major role to change that thinking and give it a balance of North to South. Why is it that the environment is so important to this country and no one has taken it up as a critical national issue? No leader has. Well, I'll tell you why. Because the controlling society, the controlling forces in this society cannot accept a different notion than private property or territory. Because if they do, they will have to admit and they will have to comply by the notions of looking at the earth as our mother, nuestra madre tierra. And that takes a whole different mindset. And that takes a whole different kind of acting. And that's something that we, as people of color, need to provide as an example to the rest of the world. Thank you very much for having me.
Aloha ka kahiaka, o wau o mililani ke ia, nā loia o nā kanaka, ke ki hanau o ka aina, kia aina, kala hoi Hawaii. Good morning, my name is Mililani Trask. I'm a Native Hawaiian attorney. In the Hawaiian way, when you ask a Hawaiian who they are, their response is keiki hanau o ka aina, child that is born up from the land. We now have information coming from Lualua on the island of Oahu that there is very high incidence of leukemia and other cancers among the Hawaiian children who live there. We believe that this is due to electromagnetic contamination. In Lualua, the United States military has taken control of 2,000 acres of Hawaiian homelands, lands set aside by the Congress to homestead our people. These lands were taken over and converted for a nuclear and military storage facility. 10 years ago, in 1981, they issued a report saying that there's electromagnetic radiation there. After the report is issued, all the military families are moved out of the area, but nobody tells the Hawaiian community that lives in the surrounding area. We have not been able to restrain that practice. We have taken it to the Western courts. We have been thrown out because the court ruled that Native Hawaiians are wards of the state and the federal government, and therefore Native Hawaiians are not allowed standing to sue in the federal courts to protect our trust lands and assets. We're the only class of Native Americans and the only class of American citizens that are not allowed access to the federal court system to seek redress of grievances relating to breach of trust. Kalahui Hawaii is pleased and proud to join all of the other Pacific Island nations in opposing the federal policy which is being perpetrated by Mr. Bush and Senator Daniel Inouye, identifying the Pacific region as the most recent national sacrifice area. We are facing a difficult struggle, and we are on the downside of the struggle. Every bit of commitment and energy is needed to save our mother and to ensure the survival of our people and all of the species of the earth. It is a difficult road to hoe. There is going to be a great deal of strife and a great deal of pain, but we must proceed. We have no alternative. This is the same position that the Native people of Hawaii found themselves in 1987 when we committed to resurrecting our national government. And at the time that we passed that Constitution, we also adopted a motto, and it's a motto that I think you might want to live by as we proceed in this environmental war that we are waging. That motto is that a difficult birth does not make the baby any less beautiful. Thank you.
We had not planned to have a demonstration, but the delegates came with so many issues that they need to raise with members of the Congress. So at noon today, rather than eating lunch, we're going to march to the Capitol.
We, the indigenous delegates of many Indian nations from throughout this country to the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit, join our voices as one voice in defense of our sacred Mother Earth. The history of the United States is the history of the destruction and sacrifice of indigenous peoples, lands, cultures, natural resources, and ways of life.
And we now must make a firm commitment to one another that we will not let a day come in the future that we do not stand together and oppose any form of environmental justice anywhere in this world that we live. God bless you all.
That it's being signed and being passed around, and we will try to have it copied and circulated to everyone after the conference so that you have a way to connect back to one another.
Why do you need to make some solvent or something with a solvent that you're going to have to dispose? Is there not some other, substance that would be biodegradable or something that's not so toxic, to use in your production?
Environmentally sound production methods.
Our involvement in the decisions around, if a corporation is going to make something, okay, in a community, if it's going to dump it in that community has a right to be involved in the production decisions, that's one. Or if they're going to dump it someplace else, it's like that. Those board meetings we gotta crack that open, okay? Because that's where those decisions made, and boom. They make that decision 40 years later, then all of a sudden people wake up and they find the problem.
The whole question of land grants has to be addressed. And that's a very important question because the courts have failed to resolve this problem. They refuse to hear our demands.
In our community, we worked for quite some time to try to move the chemical waste facility out of Alabama, but as you probably all know, that was almost impossible.
The rear microphone, and then we'll come to the middle. At the rear, yes, brother.
One of the things I feel is missing from all of these principles is any acknowledgement that we also have personal responsibilities to conduct ourselves in certain ways. Many of us have criticized the mainstream environmental movement for focusing too much on what individuals can do and ignoring some of the systematic elements of going on. But yet, as we speak about the fact that we are important because, besides we're children of God, we're an increasingly large part of the population of this nation, we too have to hold our own selves responsible. There's nothing here that says that we are subject to all of the principles that all human beings are. You know, you should watch the car that you drive, you should recycle your cans, okay, that all of those personal things are important. And in terms of justice and people's ways of conducting themselves, I think we must put in a resolution that speaks to everyone's personal responsibility as well as the broader issues of justice. You cannot operate on the justice through a personal unrighteousness.
I agree with almost all the language here, and I would like to add in item number 6, the word unemployment at the end of the sentence. Environmental justice affirms the right of all workers to gainful employment without being forced to choose between an unsafe job, good health, and unemployment, because I think that's a real issue.
Okay, thank you.
People of color and the people of third world have the power to define our own future, to define our own agenda. And so without further delay, let us celebrate together the struggle of the people of color and the third world people for environmental justice and peace with justice. Thank you.
Since yesterday, some 300 delegates have been working hard in this place for a very crucial issue before all of us. Now it is our pleasure and joy to welcome and include the participants and observers. I would like to ask all of the participants and observers who are joining from this evening, those of you who are able to stand, would you please all stand? Let us welcome them. Thank you. You will be also a very important part of this struggle that we have together. This time, we would have a prayer. Joanne Tall from Sioux Nations having the prayer of the inclusion.
As I look out to the crowd here and have seen since the conference started, all the people of different colors that have come together, and that we have survived, and that we have come to this point, to this gathering. My prayer is going to go out to the 4 directions, and to this prayer that brought you here. This prayer will go back with you and with your efforts and your struggles.
It's good to see people of color dwell together in unity in quest of justice as a prerequisite for peace tended by mercy, or to restore and preserve our earth is to affirm our kinship with God and our integrity with God. It was John who on the island of Patmos saw a new heaven and a new earth. And we must see that new heaven and that new earth and work to that end. Tonight we fight sex, race, and worker harassment. We fight the various pollutants that poison our atmosphere, not the least of which is race, sex, and worker harassment. Tonight we gather to fight for the most basic right, as we fight for racial justice and fight for gender equality and fight for equal protection under the law, that emanates from a rather awkwardly written constitution. Your challenge to the anemic character and exclusivity and elite policies of the essentially white environmental movement is now on time. It's time to build an authentic coalition that represents the people affected. White, black, urban, rural, poor, working class, the nation is fighting for its life and the Lord's earth as He has created it. For they may dump toxic waste on the poor side of town today, but as sure as the wind blows, as sure as it's one earth, what affects any of us in the morning affects the rest of us by sundown. We'll either live together as brothers and sisters or perish apart as fools. That's why there can be no elite environmental movement. It must be a universal environmental movement. When the foundation shakes, everybody has to make an adjustment. You are the salt of the earth. You are the foundation. When you come together and organize, you shake up the whole universe. Keep on shaking till you shake the dirt out so we can see a new heaven and a new earth. Thank you very much.
I think it's important that whatever we do in the area of environment, we have to attach some action to it. It's not enough to talk about it, right? Yes. When we read Rachel Carson's book, and the farm workers came and told us, you know, the farmer I work for uses DDT, we filed a lawsuit on him. And when we signed those first contracts that covered close to 100,000 farm workers, we said you have to ban DDT. And we won't sign the contract until you do. So we had banned DDT maybe 6 or 7 years before the government did. Can we build a world that is clean, that will let us participate in this country of ours? We say we can do it. How do we do it? By being organized, by working together. We say it can be done. Sí se puede, sí se puede. All right. Thank you.
And won't you join with me in addressing our Creator? Help us to love our earth, to see it as a gift, to respond to it with sensitivity and with concern always for its preservation, for its handling in such delicate fashion that it be transmitted to the folk to come with all the possible care and concern that we might evidence. Let us do our work with satisfaction, with challenge met, with opportunity grasped. Lord, be thou in our midst as we labor this day.
This plenary session is on the very important subject of our vision for the future, a redefinition of environmentalism. We're going to have a panel discussion, and then we will have a response to what our panelists presents by two of the chief executive officers of national environmental organizations. And then we will have a discussion of the summit in plenary. This is a very important time for us to be in dialogue with one another and each other. It is, in fact, a defining moment. As we've come from around and throughout this nation and from other countries in the world, provide an opportunity not only for us to have the dialogue, but for us to reach some consensus of understanding, lay a basis for mutual respect, lay a basis for our working together in a more effective way from this moment forward, so that at the appropriate time we all can be responsive to the call to redefine environmentalism.
We got an overview last night. No question about that. And this morning you're going to get another view from down below where we're struggling. Somebody has to be asking the question this morning, why is the director or worker amongst the tenants in the Deep South, why is this person here standing here talking about the vision of the future? And I want to say that we have come a mighty long ways. And I want to be clear is that we stand in the footprints of so many brothers and sisters who have died along the way. And our struggle just didn't begin, this environmental struggle just didn't begin 6 years ago when the Gulf Coast tenants began to look at the poisoning of people in Cancer Alley.
No, sir.
This environmental struggle did not just begin 10 years ago when the Southern Organizing Committee for Economic and Social Justice helped us to begin the Gulf Coast Tenants Organization to deal with the Reagan administration design to cut back and to cut out the government's involvement in housing for the poor in this country and to evict us and put us into the street and to take the money saved and put it in the military and wage war against people of color all across the world and people who were not part of the capitalist system. And it didn't just begin in the freedom movement of the 60s. And it didn't just begin with the Student Nonviolent Organizing Committee and with the SCLC and with the Southern Negro Youth Congress. It just didn't begin. But this struggle, this environmental struggle that we are dealing with now began when this guy, what they call his name? Christopher who? Discovered
that he was lost.
That he was lost and asked somebody to save him. And we've been struggling against that ever since. We knew that we were fighting. And we knew that it would be an uphill journey. We were able to develop a vision where we would not be poisoned, that we could have jobs, housing, educate our children. And that's what we want to share with you this morning. In that struggle in St. Charles Parish, Louisiana, we knew we needed allies. We knew, talking about going up against petrochemical companies, some of the major companies in this world, we knew that we could not do it alone. And we reached out to some of the Sierra Club members. They couldn't understand us. They couldn't understand how the sons and the daughters of sharecroppers and folk on the plantation could be talking to them about coalition building, and let us be, we got to lead you to help us in this situation. They couldn't sit with us. Racism was a problem. But we were all gasping for breath. We were all gasping for breath. Now, on the mourner's bench, for those of you who don't know much about the mourner's bench, you sit on the mourner's bench for a whole week during revivals. And everybody who's a Christian comes around the mourner's bench and prays for you, that you will soon get to be saved. Get the Spirit. Thank you, Dr. Jacobs. Now, we have been building our movement. And in the last few years, several letters have gone to environmentalists. This comes from the Gulf Coast Tenants Organization and several other organizations. It says, it is also imperative that the leaders of our movement confer to examine the practices, past and present, that result in poisonous waste disposal and location of poisonous industries in the third world communities in the United States. And that's why we're here. I don't say this. We've come a mighty long way. Whether we are able to develop a relationship, and we hope that we will be, it's going to depend a lot on you.
This is a dream, and let me get my big hug from you, Ben.
All right.
I told Ben a year ago that I would like to see some people of color. I've been fighting the environment for 9 years on a daily basis. I have even had people call me on Christmas Day questioning about the environment. Mostly everywhere I went for the past, I said about 8 years, I was the only black among 300 or 400, 500 whites speaking on the environment. And I'm happy to see so many of my sisters and brothers are here today to fight for this struggle. I live in a housing complex that was built on a landfill. Our area has been the dumping ground for 163 years. So then, that's when I started organizing for to clean up our area, to do something about it. And then when I found out about the environment problem, then I really got on that. And I've been working hard on that ever since. When I went to Illinois EPA hearing, they didn't have no intention for me to be in there, but I think that was an accident for them to put my name on the list in Springfield. They was concerned about 201 chemicals that's being emitted in the air. The majority of these chemicals was causing cancer. It was causing sometimes a nerve disorder. Now just think about it. All the concern is about what one chemical could do. But if they would put all these chemicals together and do a study, imagine they'll know what's going on. But they don't want to do that. All they do is just give tests of one chemical at a time. But we are demanding for them to do a mixture of chemicals. Even if they just mix up 10 of them, it's bad enough, let's know 201. But they don't care what happened to us.
We are challenging what has happened in Puerto Rico in the last 45 years. We are, through social practice, through organizing, trying to break away from the ideology that we Puerto Ricans cannot make it by ourselves. We are breaking away from the colonial ideology, that we lack the natural resources, that we lack the people, that we cannot deal with our own house, our own island, our own country. It's a very slow and contradictory process. It's not easy to break away from 498 years of colonialism. It takes some time, some patience, but we're moving towards there. And in doing so, it's very important for us to exchange ideas, experiences, to get to understand what others are doing in Hawaii, in Louisiana, in Illinois, in Mexico, in Texas, in other areas of the world, because we can learn a lot from each other.
The Yankton Sioux, which traditionally refer to themselves as the Ihantowan Dakota Nation, passed a resolution. The Ihantowan Dakota Nation is a sovereign entity by birthright and recognized as such by the United States of America through valid treaties with that same government. Whereas, pursuant to such birthright of sovereignty, the Ihantowan Dakota Nation reserves the exclusive right and authority to ensure that its children's inherent right to be safe in their homes, workplace, and our children's right to grow up strong and healthy, not diseased, deformed, or die before they've had a chance to live, but to be safe in their homes, free from cancer-causing asbestos or other hazards, and to play in their backyards or anywhere in our territory free from erupting chemical pits, contaminated water, soil, and shall not be abridged. Whereas, allowing our territory to be targeted or be utilized as a waste disposal site for any imported waste of any type shall constitute such an abridgment. Now therefore it be resolved that the Business and Claims Committee shall hereby be directed to develop public policy subject to approval of the General Counsel that serves to prevent toxic waste and pollutants from entering our territory or from passing through our territory. That was passed on April 5th of 1991.
In order to achieve the environmental justice of low-income, limited English-speaking immigrant women at our workplace, we need the support from and be part of progressive, broader, inclusive environmental movement like we have seen last 1.5 days, which includes workplace issues along with other environmental issues. Only doing so, we can start changing the practices and policies of the industries, government, and the environmental movement. Safe and healthy working environment where we breathe for 10 to 20 hours a day is a must. We need jobs which do not slowly and permanently disable or kill us. Thanks.
Prior to the summit, we sent out invitations to the chief executive officers of all of the major environmental organizations in the United States. And we're pleased now to hear from two of the chief executive officers who came forward, on the one hand, to support the summit process, but more specifically for this panel, to avail themselves to respond to the panel and all that they have heard since coming last evening. We thought it was important that as we engage this defining moment that we hear from other sisters and brothers who have claimed the environment to be a priority.
We environmental organizations and the Sierra Club work on waste, toxics. Those are at the top of the list of our chapters, they tell us, chapters' agendas. We also work on land use issues, freeways, which are threatened to cut through neighborhoods, urban sprawl, which leaves the central city behind. These are all issues which are true common cause that all of us in this room share. We know, not just because we're told in this important historic conference, that it is right to be in the front of the battle lines for environmental justice. I'm humbled and privileged to be here and to learn from those of you who really literally put your lives on the line every day to improve the health and beauty of the environment in which you live. We know that we have been conspicuously missing from the battles for environmental justice all too often. And we regret that fact, sincerely. I believe that this historic conference is a turning point, however, and while we can still say the mea culpas from time to time, this is a charge to all of us to work and look into the future rather than to beat our breasts about the past. Pat, we are not the enemy. We, national environmental organizations. The divide and conquer approach is one that the Reagan and Bush administration have used all too successfully for all too long. We're here to reach across the table and to build the bridge of partnership with you all. Beyond it just being right, let's be practical. We in the environmental movement know that it is in our enlightened self-interest to be fully involved in seeking environmental justice, or we risk becoming irrelevant. Irrelevant in the eyes of a growing number of Americans, irrelevant in the eyes of a growing number of judges, of city council members, state legislators, and federal officials. We will not become irrelevant. We will be there with you.
I want to start by saying that I really am honored to be here today. We at NRDC were pleased from the beginning to be a part of this summit. And I particularly want to thank the conveners who have worked so hard to put this together for inviting several of us to come up here and speak. I too believe this event is of historic significance. It will mark a major turning point in the environmental movement. And I can tell you it will change NRDC. I would argue that the people who put it together really had a vision. It is indeed a visionary meeting because it is going to unite a whole new segment of life together in a common fight. NRDC as an institution, and I personally, have come to realize over the years, and maybe more recently, that the issues of racism, poverty, and environmental degradation are intertwined and inseparable. They are all a part of the same policies and practices that shape the quality of life. And the environmental movement cannot solve one without solving or helping to solve the other.
We have come here to define for ourselves the issues of the ecology and the environment, to speak these truths that we know from our lives to those participants and observers who we have invited here to join us. We have come for you to hear from our mouths directly our understandings, so there will be no confusion and no misunderstandings. For us, the issues of the environment do not stand alone by themselves. They are not narrowly defined. Our vision of the environment is woven into an overall framework of social, racial, and economic justice. It is deeply rooted in our cultures and our spirituality. It is based in a long tradition and understanding and respect for the natural world. The environment for us is where we live, where we work, and where we play. The environment affords us the platform to address the critical issues of our time. Questions of militarism and defense policy, religious freedom, cultural survival, energy, sustainable development, the future of our cities, transportation, housing, land and sovereignty rights, self-determination, employment, and we can go on and on. What we seek is a relationship based on equity, mutual respect, mutual interest, and justice. We refuse narrow definitions. It's not just ancient forests. That's important. It's just not saving the whales. That's important. And saving other endangered species. That's important. We understand the life cycle and the connectedness of life. But our communities and our people are endangered species too. We refuse a paternalistic relationship. We are not interested in a parent-child relationship. Your organizations may be or may not be older than ours. Your organizations definitely have more money than ours. But if you are to form a partnership with us, it will be as equals and nothing else but equals.
I have finally been able to find people that understand us. The black and the yellow people that have gathered together with the red people here understand what we were saying. And it has touched my heart, and I thank you for that, and the delegates here. Now I want to be very specific about the way that the environmental movement could help Indian people. A terrible, underhanded collusion has been formed between the waste companies and the Interior Department. They have, in a very cynical exploitation of reservation poverty, decided to make our lands, the little land that we have left, the cesspools of American society. They think that by waving their big money trash dollars, they can force Indian people to accept America's waste. And I'm going to tell you, we do not want your waste. If you use it, you can keep it.
My ancestors are of 3 nations. 2 are indigenous, and 1 was brought over when the indigenous people were killed. We talk about corporations here, but we have to remember that the corporations are made up of people. And the mindset that came over here with that first ship is still here. The philosophies of Native people are the basis for the Constitution of this country and organization of the states. Our children are growing up and they're going to school. Indigenous people teach their children from very, very young to have respect for each other and for other people, but more importantly, to have respect and responsibility for the earth. Thank you.
Contaminated, they claim it's purified. It's more like liquefied genocidal suicide. Birds and fish being killed by the mills when their wings and their gills filled with chemical oil spills. Here's the plot: waste not, bought not, cook them up and serve them to fast food restaurants. It's whack to me when I see factories and nicotine fiends promoting lung disease, while poisonous gases that pass from an airplane fertilize our crops with droplets of purple rain. Fire and brimstone puncture the ozone, roam the whole zone, disasters unknown. The atmosphere and the air might appear clear, but beware, cause what's not seen is still there. Drug free, don't fiend for no rock hits, but each and every day I get a toxic shock hit. Space shuttle bust through the earth's crust, bringing us moon dust, arrive with genocidal suicide. Thank you.
Obviously, you have been discussing issues of exceptional importance to us today. Some of our elders have also said that it is you that are the critical generation. You are the ones that make the difference. You are the ones that are going to bring about the changes that are so necessary to keep this world in which we live, which we as Cheyennes call Mahel Himansta, the creation of the Great One, in the way that he gave it to us, the way that you and I have inherited it from our grandparents, and the way that we should give to our children and our grandchildren and their grandchildren after them.
I would first like to begin by acknowledging everyone here in the Leadership Summit body, because this is in fact your Leadership Summit. And I would like you to acknowledge those who have sacrificed much, especially those who have had to work hard to come up with the means to come to this part, to be here, to be present with us, and for us to benefit from their experience, their knowledge, and their visions.
I do feel a tremendous privilege in being able to come before you now to bring to us a living example of why we have gathered here tonight, to present to you an individual from the Marshall Islands. He and his people were chosen to share in receipt of the International Right Livelihood Award, often referred to as the Alternative Nobel Prize. In selecting him and his people, the Right Livelihood Foundation specifically honored the people's resolute effort to oppose U.S. nuclear colonialism in the Pacific. I present to you Senator Chetan Anjan.
For almost 20 years, I have struggled in behalf of my people to find the truth of the question we have been asking: is our homeland safe? We sang a song, "Over my head, I see freedom in the sky. Over my head, I see justice in the sky." Brothers and sisters, freedom and justice is that promised land that the great man of this nation, Dr. Martin Luther King, told us about. What do we do now? Keep fighting. We should stand together in solidarity, fighting. And fighting. Otherwise, our ship will sink, and we will not reach the shore of that promised land. Ladies and gentlemen, in behalf of my people especially our children. Thank you very much.
To do this song. This is the woman that introduced me. This is really her song. She wrote this song for the kids that she works with in Selma, Alabama, Rose Sanders. You are so beautiful. You are so beautiful. Well, you are so beautiful. And it's so beautiful, beautiful to everybody. We are so beautiful. We are so beautiful. Oh, we are so beautiful. We are so beautiful. And it's so beautiful, beautiful to be us.
Now you really got me going. I have to tell you a story. All right. I don't look that old, but almost 30 years ago, I was the first faculty advisor for the Black Student Union at the University of Louisville. One day, we were out demonstrating. We were all arrested, spent a night in the jail, and came out into my office the next morning. By the way, we used to sing, you know, we shall overcome, and there was the second verse, black and white together. And we always, our friends made sure black and white, yellow together. There was always a yellow in there. Because we are doing together. After spending a night in jail, when I came back to my office, there was a dish of jelly beans. There were some black jelly beans, there were some white jelly beans, one yellow jelly bean. Those of us, yellow Asians, are not that many in these movements, but there's at least one jelly bean among the black and whites, and all of us together. And it is important for us to be.
And the voice said, tell them that they are my witnesses. Tell them that I brought them here together this weekend. And that they're to go out as my witnesses to heal my land. In the labor camp, we were being housed in an old abandoned schoolhouse. You know, we were some of the first homeless people. They put us in anything they found. But in that camp, we had a little tradition among the crew that whoever felt they did very well in the picking for that day, they would buy pop for soft drinks for the whole crew. I said, I want to buy the soft drinks. I want to make good money today, work good today so I can buy soft drinks for the whole crew. It was a mark of a full-fledged worker. I said, I want to be a worker. I want to be part of this community. So as I was doing this work in the field, understand what I'm saying? That was my job. My job wasn't picking the cotton. My job was making community, because that's what nourishes us. That's what makes life. You are the citizens of that new world, and that new earth, and that new heaven that is coming about. Democracy starts at the negotiating table, so that people can participate and make decisions about those very specific things that impact and affect their lives. Everything from housing to wages to job security to the environment to pesticides, they belong in the negotiating table, and we have a right to say how we want to expose our lives.
In 1982, we knew that where we lived, where we worked, and where we played was really our environment. And when the state of North Carolina decided that it was going to put into a community of 65% African Americans, proud African American people who had nothing but the land that was left to them by their families, we said no. We said that we'll put our life on the line if it meant doing that. And that's what we did. And we did that by laying our bodies in front of the trucks. Many, many good things did come out of that struggle in Warren County. And we are just so proud that we are a part of that history. And I want to say to you at this time and at this place that because of what happened in Warren County, we know and we believe that God does work in mysterious ways, and He has wonders to perform. Thank you very much.
Last night, yesterday, after a long debate, many hours of discussion, considerable amount of input from you as delegates, you charged us, the Planning Committee and your co-chairs, and individuals that you selected from your own regions, from your own delegations, you charged us to go back and take the principles of environmental justice, rewrite them, taking into consideration the many recommendations you had made.
We knew that they weren't going to be easy, but we had to look at a bigger picture. There is a bigger picture that we had to go. We had to go beyond rural lines. We had to go beyond urban lines. We had to go across county lines. We had to go across the borders. We had to go across the universe, because these lines and borders were not something that we set up. But the final scope that we had to look at was that we were coming together as a nation, a people of color.
We need to define in our language, through our mouths, what we did. And that's what we tried to do. And we tried to represent your interests. We tried to represent the things that you had to say. And I hope that we did justice to that.
There was equal participation among all of us in gender, in cultural, ethnic background, and in age. And I think that really speaks to the movement that we're trying to create. And I think that that's really important, that we didn't have to struggle to achieve this.
If one person dissents, it makes the rest of us have an obligation to that person to help that person understand what it is we're trying to get across. So what I'm asking here is to have a true consensus.
We appreciate the work of the group, and this preamble represents everything. It's to us in coming this way to the conference and participating and going and taking it back to our communities. It represents the spirit of everything that we've done these days, and we want to take it as seriously as we can. It embraces the words that we feel have been spoken here and that we feel are sacred. When our words are spoken, regardless of how tired we are, there are some communities that consider our words so sacred that they won't even have them written down. And that's the way we're taking this preamble back to our community.
We went from having 11 principles that really incorporated all of the ideas that we've been talking about to 17 principles in response to people's desire to be specific. And principles are generally not specific. What is specific are the ways in which the principles are to be used, the description of the circumstances that the principles are designed to apply to, and the suggestions for ways to implement those principles.
That I think all you have to do is add the word peoples. In paragraph 11, Native American peoples. Then you're not just talking about the Native American Indian, you're talking about Native Americans in Alaska, wherever if you take the word in its general sense, then it means natives everywhere.
There are things we have in common, and there are some important differences, and those differences need to be raised up and respected. My understanding of this point is recognizing, let me try to put this in crude language, recognizing that the government of the United States has broken treaties with certain Native American peoples, okay, in this land. Then there are groups of people, indigenous people, native people, with whom they have no treaty relationship, that they've never had. And what I think, and I would include Hawaiians in that, as well as some people on the continental United States with whom the government has never had a treaty, but ought to have some.
There was no point, I think, that took up more of our time than this point.
In terms of protecting the environment, management by indigenous native people is the important critical issue we're advancing here, and not necessarily any special privileges.
In terms of the document as a whole, that body had decided not to challenge it, even though there might have been particularities or whatever they disagreed with, because in spirit it was there. And we really did not feel like fighting territorial battles for ourselves. So that, I was asked to say that is why the brothers and sisters have been quiet.
I suggest that we give unanimous approval to this document as it now stands and act in accordance with the unanimity of the document.
Chair, accept that as a motion. All those in favor of consensus on this document, please stand. The chair recognizes the consensus. Thank you. Wait.
The trials, they come on every hand. I feel like going on. I feel like going on.
Here are the seedlings. Here are your seedlings. The delegates of the First National People of Color Environmental Summit. Come to us, embrace us, and nurture and support us. Fill our minds with knowledge. Fill our bodies with strength. Fill our hearts with wisdom. Uanoa, it is flown.
We are your children. We are your children, our parents who were railroad workers, our parents who are sewing factory ladies. We are your children, our agricultural farmers who worked on farms that they will never own. We are your children who were born in concentration camps at Tule Lake. We are your children. We are survivors. We, dear ancestors, gained strength from your resistance and your fight. And today, from this summit, we have evolved from resistor to creators, with everyone here, black, yellow, red, brown, and white. We will bring you honor. Amen.
And in my environment as a Chicana, Mexicana, India, como me quieran llamar, our relatives showed us the way of nonviolence, unity, and loyalty. We have to be loyal to each other. We have to have unity.
It's very hard to talk about these things because they are the essence of who we are, not only as Native people, but all people, I believe, all throughout the world. We went through 4 days of growth. I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't want to prepare a text. And this morning I was thinking, we growed up. We went through growing experience these past 4 days. We came here in birth, started that first day not knowing who we are. We were infants. Didn't know how to move our arms and our legs. That second day we went further and grew a little bit more. We became young people, young children. Still kind of awkward. The third day, if you notice, some things started coming together. We became adults yesterday. And we know how it is to be an adult. We have to be responsible. And there's anger and laughter. There's all those aspects of life. And today, a lot of good things came together. We're leaving here as elders with the message.
In your pre-summit mailings, you were told that the summit would do two things: adopt a set of principles of environmental justice, which you have, and issue a communique. The communique is in the form of a call to action. We came here to share with one another, to redefine environmentalism, to be able to take back to our communities at the grassroots level so that we can strengthen what already exists. This week at the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C., a new international movement of indigenous and grassroots peoples was born. It is a multiracial, multicultural convergence of existing local and regional grassroots movements and struggles, which are already underway by people of color, which are actively resisting various forms of environmental genocide against them throughout the world. We have come from all states of the United States, Central and Latin America, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Alaska, the Marshall Islands, and Canada. We are a new movement which raises the life and death struggles of indigenous and grassroots communities of color to an unprecedented, multinational, integrated level. the fight against the disproportionate harmful impact of environmental degradation upon peoples of colors is not new. We have always been in this struggle. We have always known what is at stake. This movement addresses every aspect of our quality of life. Unlike traditional mainstream environmental and social justice organizations, this multiracial, multicultural movement of peoples of color is evolving from the bottom up and not from the top down. It seeks a global vision based on grassroots realities. We have no choice but to come together, to overcome our common barriers and resist our common foes. Only in the diversity of our oppression are we able to clearly see the pervasive pattern of genocide, environmental racism. We gather to speak for ourselves and to define the issues in our own way. This is our call to action.
Oh, freedom.
We must take over the leadership of this country. He doesn't say that. He just keeps saying, we must take over the leadership. I added, of this country. And it's time. Do you know how that it's time? I keep telling my children, because I keep thinking, what do black mothers, what do we say to our children now? I say to my children, you will be the leaders, that you will take over the leadership of this country. I'm not talking about you're going to be a governor here or there and you're going to be this or that. I'm saying you're going to be the leadership of this country. You will be deciding what happens to us in terms of education, our social policies, our cultural policies, our political policies, that you are the leadership of this country, because it's time for a change.